Hello and welcome to The Charity Show, the podcast for charity insiders by charity insiders. Please rate, follow or subscribe to us on your usual podcast platform. And here's what's coming up in episode 15. The risk factor for charities partnering with celebrities, obviously you do it for the right reasons, but there is a risk factor there, isn't there? What if suddenly those people are in the press for the wrong reason? What is the impact on the charity? How do charities mitigate against that risk?
For me, it is about being a leader of leaders. And I know that's one of those cliche phrases we use a lot in the sector, but I've learned a lot about that. And I think probably in my first year and a half, being really honest with you as a chief executive, it was a bit too much about me. And I've really learned that actually, you as a chief executive can allocate resources, you can bring people into the table, but you can't do everything.
It's the annual London Santa in the City run. For 3,000 Santas, which is, a sight to behold, 3,000 Santas ran for over 50 different charities.
The highlight for me this week, Piers, has been my new specs, my new glasses. Oh my goodness me, it's changed the world for me. You and I met up for lunch the other day, and we were like a couple of old men trying to read the menu.
Hello, and welcome to episode 15 of The Charity Show with me, Piers Townley, PR Manager at the Brain Tumour Charity.
And me, Tim Beynon, Head of Marketing Engagement at Firefighters Charity.
So Tim, how's things going? All set, all sorted for Christmas already?
Christmas, goodness me. Christmas shopping, no, not at all. Shockingly bad on that front, to be honest. I'm still in denial that it's as close as it actually is. But Christmas is an interesting one, isn't it? And I've been looking into this, and this is how nerdy I am in terms of looking at things like how much people spent on Black Friday over that whole 2 weeks. Also, Black Friday seemed to last forever this year. It's not a day anymore, is it? It's a fortnight. Anyway, apparently...
It just started in August.
Yeah, I know, it's mental. Madness. Anyway, apparently £23.7 billion in the UK was spent over the 2-week Black Friday period, which is staggering. That's such a huge amount of money, people buying stuff. But interesting as well as that huge amount of money that's obviously spent online, there's also lots of stuff in the press at the moment about people spending more in charity shops, which I think is great. Bit of a contradiction there in terms of the fact that people are spending all this money online, but then they're also potentially going to charity shops as well. So yeah, what are your thoughts on charity shops? Do you do any of your Christmas shopping in charity shops? Will you?
Not, I'll browse them. And probably because we've got skin in the game as working for a charity, just to see because the Brain Tumour Charity doesn't have any sort of high street presence like that. We have toyed with it in the past. So no, I will browse them, but most of my shopping is probably done online, probably last minute and probably fairly impulsively on a Friday or Saturday night in between watching a movie, to be honest. I mean, I said that out loud now, but obviously, no, I have a lot of thought going to it. Every present I think of is very carefully curated and last moment.
Yeah.
I'm not you though. I'm in denial. It's just our charity calendars come round again, and we seem to have been planning some of the Christmas stuff for ages, and all of a sudden, it's here, isn't it?
Yeah, I know. So let's forget about Christmas. Let's put Christmas to one side for this episode at least. It's been a good week for us at the Firefighters Charity. We were nominated and shortlisted for the Best In-House Campaign Award at the Charity Comms Inspiring Communicator Awards, and we didn't win, unfortunately. It was a really hotly contested category, and some amazing entrants there. And MenCap won in the end in our category, but it was such a pleasure to be a part of that experience. It was a really fantastic event, and hats off to Adela Worley, the Chief Exec at Charity Comms. She's been on the show before. And they put on a fantastic event. It really, really was an honour to be a part of it, and I was very proud of my team for the work they put into the projects and the campaign which we were nominated for. So it was disappointing, but at the same time a real honour and a privilege to be a part of that event. So that was great. But really, the highlight for me this week, Piers, has been my new specs, my new glasses. Oh my goodness me, it's changed the world for me. You and I met up for lunch the other day, and we were like a couple of old men trying to read the menu. It was terrible. It was like holding it at arm's length trying to read it. Now it's all changed. Got new specs I can actually see. So there you go.
You do. You look like a new person. You look very, very clever, very intelligent as well. And I'm in denial. I've had them for a while. All this close working on the computer. I need them more often. But you're right. We were there with arm's length, weren't we? With the menus. Couldn't quite read.
Oh, it's terrible. But yeah, there you go. So yeah, very happy with my new glasses. What about you? Tell me about your week. What has it been last couple of weeks?
Well, we had a really good start to the week. We had the high-profile supporter and founder of the Lewis Moody Foundation. Lewis Moody himself popped by. He just got back from a big Sahara trek, so he came to the HQ of the Brain Tumour Charity down here in Fleet, and gave a talk to some of the staff, because obviously we've had quite a lot of new staff over the last year who probably don't know much about Lewis's association with the Brain Tumour Charity, the story, the fundraising, and of course all the epic challenges and expeditions he's done on behalf of the foundation, raising so much money and so much awareness for families who are affected by brain tumour diagnosis. And obviously Lewis was one of our guests on our last episode, so it was lovely to catch up with him in person and hear about his latest Sahara trek. And he was still dusting the sand out of his hair, but yeah, really good to see Lewis and Annie both in the office. And then elsewhere, like so many other charities, in fact, more than 1,250 charities, we're now in full big give mode. Actually, the closing date is Tuesday, so when this episode comes out, and it's that week-long matched fundraising annual event that takes place, and we become part of that, all our social posts, and we galvanize all our supporters, all our celebrities to repost and try and raise so much money in that week, alongside all those hundreds of other charities that are doing the same. So a big preparation week for us, and then fingers crossed as it closes in the next 24, 48 hours, we'll reach our target. But good luck to everyone else and all their fundraising efforts as well.
Fantastic. Also, don't forget, you were a full-on roving reporter when Lewis came and popped into your office, weren't you? You got your microphone out, and we got a little clip, didn't we? So I think we can play that, hear what the man himself had to say when he visited.
I think I was prepared for most of it. I knew it'd be cold in the evenings. It actually wasn't as cold as I thought it would be. In my mind, I think I prepared for sand dunes that were, as far as the eye could see, and at times that was the case. But also, there'd been like a flood for the first time in 15 years. That wasn't something I was expecting in the Sahara. And so every now and again, when you went over a sand dune around a corner, there was like this little sort of oasis, pool with a tree growing out of it, and in some areas there was a ton of greenery.
That was great to hear from Lewis there. He's got so many stories. Honestly, we could have listened to him all day. He got such a warm reception over HQ, and he remains such a great supporter of the Brain Tumour Charity and a fantastic founder for the Lewis Moody Foundation. So just fantastic to hear from him.
Starting a new job is always a bit of a nervy time, but what's it like to take the reins as CEO of one of the country's most familiar and well-established charities? Well, Chris Sherwood, current Chief Executive of the RSPCA, should know. A seasoned Chief Executive, he will shortly be moving from the animal welfare charity to the top job at the NSPCC. So, we spoke to him recently to find out what it takes to be a Chief Executive, and as you're about to hear in the first part of our two-part interview, he also shares his advice for anyone thinking about making the step up. Hi, Chris. Good to see you. Welcome to the Charity Show. Fantastic to have you on. It's a pleasure to meet you, and delighted to talk to you today a bit about life as a charity chief executive, and something you obviously got a huge amount of experience on. And we want to congratulate you first of all on your recent news of your appointment as the new CEO of NSPCC, and something you'll be moving to from your current role as chief executive of the RSPCA. So fantastic move, and we want to dig into that and find out a bit more about that and all you've got planned and your hopes and dreams for the future in a second. But before we talk about that, perhaps you can sort of give us a little bit of a potted history of your charity career today. What has brought you to this point?
Thank you so much, Piers and Tim, for having me on the show. I'm really delighted to join you today as well, and I'm looking forward to our conversation. So, potted history of my career. Well, I if I'm honest, I fell into charity work a little bit by accident. I was a student that had no money, and I worked as a temporary worker for social services in Plymouth City Council when I was 19. And needed to earn money to put myself through university. And from that, really found this path into the social sector. And what kind of drove me was, I grew up in Corby in Northamptonshire during the period of deindustrialization, really strong social fabrics in Corby, but also quite a lot of social challenges in the town as well. And my kind of passion for social justice was really instilled in growing up in a town that was facing multiple challenges, but actually those ties of civil society were really strong. And so my first kind of foray into the social sector was for a startup social enterprise based in Hertfordshire. I moved from Devon to London to work for a startup called Disable Go. And then from there, working for brands like Scope a little bit of time at Shore Trust, and then Relay, RSPCA, and now NSPCC. So I feel really fortunate in my career to have worked in some amazing organizations. But I suppose the thing that ties that together is I've worked in organizations that have a broad canvas, because I'm really interested in how the social sector contributes to creating what I call the good society, one that's inclusive, one that's compassionate, one that's kind, and one where we consider our individual and collective impact on each other, on animals, and on the planet. And that's why I've tended to make, certainly in the latter part of my career, these choices to go to organizations like Relate, Relationships, RSPCA, Animals and Humans, and obviously Child Protection at the NSPCC.
Yeah, fantastic. So obviously it sounds very much like charity is deep rooted in you, and has been throughout your life, which is fantastic to see. And I want to talk about that move between, as you mentioned, animals and humans, and how you've gone between the two. So let's talk about that in a second. But just want to talk a little bit about your first role as chief executive was with Relate. You mentioned, and you were there, as I understand. I'm sorry, I have gone through your LinkedIn, and I know LinkedIn stalking is a terrible thing, but I have gone through your LinkedIn, so forgive me for that. But you were there for 5 years, where you had previously been director of policy, communications, and digital services. What made you at that point want to take the step up to chief executive, and how did you find that? Was it daunting? Was it something you'd always wanted to do? What was that like?
I'm laughing because I was bricking myself when I took on the chief executive. I was there 6 years actually, and I worked for an incredible chief executive, Ruth Sutherland. I think Ruth, I've learned so much from her in my career. And when she approached me about the role, she took me out for a drink and she said, "Come and work for Relate. I had a permanent job at the time. You'll be an interim director. And we'll pay you less money, and we've got no funding after about 4 months." And I was like, dial me in, I'm in. It's an incredible organization. And Ruth left. So I was brought in as a sort of director of policy and external affairs, and I'd never done that role before. And what I think was incredible about what Ruth did was that she focused on someone's kind of character and skills and being able to train them up into the role. Because I didn't have, I'd been 2 years as a public affairs officer or 3 years as a media manager. So there was some risk in that, but she could see that potential in me. And, I was probably about 30 at the time when I took on that job. And she could see that potential and supported me. And I was able to do a job that I'd wanted to do, and, which on paper I probably would have struggled to have been able to do, but she saw that potential. And we were a good partnership. And we did a rebrand of Relay, and we really positioned it as a campaigning organization and built out the prevention piece as well, and a big digital transformation, because the shift to a multi-channel service offer was a big part of the work that I did in my 3 years as director of policy, digital, and external affairs. So, which feels very passé now, but at the time was pretty cutting edge. And particularly in a complex federated structure with not a lot of reserves to be able to invest in that change. So that was very exciting. Then she moved on, and the chair at the time, encouraged me to apply for the job. And I went, "Oh, good God, no, I can't do that job at all." Which, by the way, is a really bad idea to say, because then actually I went away and thought about it. And I had some mentoring support at the time. And to answer your question, the mentoring support actually really challenged me, because if I'm honest with you, there was probably a bit of ego in the room. I'd love to be chief executive. And actually my mentor was saying, that ain't a good enough reason to go and apply to be a chief executive. It's what are you going to do about, what are you going to do in the role, and how does your skill set help you do that? And I really thought a lot about what could I bring to that role. And for me, it was around a lot of organizational change needed to happen. And so it really shifted my focus from, wouldn't it be nice to be a chief executive, actually to do this role for this reason. And that's what the mentoring support challenged me on. And so, yeah, I was successful in that recruitment process and was then chief executive during quite a challenging period of organizational change for 3 years before moving to the RSPCA. But it was that, but why are you applying for it? Not for the status. Do it because there's a reason and why you can bring something to the table.
And with some of that CEO experience now under your belt, Chris, what sort of personal and professional qualities do you think make a good CEO, or what makes it a good foundation for potentially being a CEO?
I think, Piers, in your question there, it links a bit to what you were asking before, Tim. I think I've learned a lot. I mean, I've been a chief executive for nearly a decade now. And I think if I could go back and say to myself in my first year and a half as chief executive was just relax a bit. There's only so much you can do. And I think the key thing is you're only as good as the people around you, and so building that team and really getting them to work as a team, and that alignment against the strategy and alignment of values, alignment of purpose is really important. But for me, it is about being a leader of leaders. And I know that's one of those cliche phrases we use a lot in the sector, but I've learned a lot about that. And I think probably in my first year and a half, being really honest with you as a chief executive, it was a bit too much about me and what I could do. And I've really learned that actually, you as a chief executive can allocate resources, you can bring people into the table, but you can't do everything, and it is about how you work in concert with your team. And I learned a lot about that the hard way, because I've had some very challenging times in my times as a chief executive, and it's that team that's really important. And then the support outside of work as well is important, that work-life balance. I like to travel and go off and do crazy trips around the world. I'm off to Libya in 2 weeks' time.
Wow.
But that to travel is the balance to the day job.
Not the obvious holiday destination. But...
No, but I'm going to go and see Leptis Magna. I'm a bit of a fan of ancient history, so yeah. And again with a friend and I, we've been to some incredible countries, been to Turkmenistan together, and Azerbaijan and Armenia and Algeria. So we're talking up another nation together.
That's a whole new podcast. That is Chris's travels. I'm going to go off script a little bit, Chris, because I was really struck. It's something that is a recurring theme when we do the podcast about the mentoring aspect of it. You said you had a bit of a mentor situation before you took on that CEO role. How important was that? And we see it coming up and again with our guests, that it's actually providing a really good sound bar for the next progression when people move roles.
Look, I'm really fortunate to have had, during my whole time as chief executive at Relate, and then during my first half of my time at RSPCA, an incredible mentor and somebody who's actually retired now, an incredible woman called Caroline Copeman. And she really worked with me, and she was a mentor, not a coach. And coaching I've had before as well, it's also fantastic. But it was that advice from her wealth of experience and the challenge, and helping me to think through our strategy and helping me to think through the kinds of changes that we've been bringing to the organization. So that mentoring was really important, because I was relatively young when I became the chief executive. I was 37 at the time when I became RSPCA. I forget the date now, RSPCA, and 34 when I became a chief executive of Relate. And so that was relatively young, and that mentoring support was really important for me in helping me to grow. And then I think the other thing was continuous professional development as well. And part of my, when I took on the Relate chief executive job was, I actually said, rather than pay me the salary that you're offering me, offer me a lower salary so I can do a professional qualification. And Relate were incredibly supportive in supporting that. So I went off to do the Akivo Institute of Directors Diploma in Company Direction, which really grounded me, because, as a sector, we're really good at promoting talent, but not necessarily investing in that talent. And that diploma really gave me a really good grounding in finance for non-finance, because I'd never read a balance sheet before I became a chief executive. I didn't know about reserves. You knew how to do a OPEX budget, and all of a sudden you're now having to be in a finance and audit risk committee talking about investments and business cases. And, I didn't have that grounding, and then governance and strategy. I could think about it, but actually giving me some tools that were really useful. And I still use that, that learning from that course nearly a decade later today.
So it's ongoing.
It's a big change, isn't it? Sorry, but I was going to say it's a big change, Chris, isn't it? From being in a situation where you might be a specialist in terms of being a director or specializing in a certain area, to being chief executive where you've got to be across everything. So you've got to be as on on top of IT and finance as you have in terms of policy and HR. You've got to cover all fields. You've got to be an expert on everything.
And I'm not sure you have to be an expert on everything. I'm not sure I quite agree with that, but you do need to be able to ask questions and be able to kind of have that antennae up. And the thing that I've really learned about is about that really listening to an organization and what it's telling you, because, certainly I made a mistake with an issue when I was first chief executive Relate. I didn't listen enough to an issue that was in the organization, and it became a bigger issue. And actually I could have dealt with that earlier. And I learned that the hard way. But you need to be able to be across those areas. And I think the other thing for me, the director to chief executive jump, personally for me, was a bigger jump than going from a chief executive of a small organization to a bigger organization. And it was because, you've got all those issues you've got to be aware of. And certainly I remember as a director, you had your moments in the spotlight where there was an issue in your area and then it got a bit quieter. And as a chief executive, it never gets quiet. It's always issues in the spotlight. And certainly when it's tricky, people look at you for that kind of reassurance. And I always use the swan metaphor because obviously I work for an animal charity, that it's very graceful above the table, but below, her feet are going paddling like mad, going, I don't know what to do in this situation. But yeah, that kind of swan metaphor has certainly seen me through a few tricky times.
Fascinating stuff from Chris, and we've got the second part of that interview coming up shortly. But before that, let's take a look at some third sector news. What have you got, Piers?
This is something that always fascinates me. The Google views, the 360 mapping, the virtual world that is being used and to help charities and alongside their campaigns, but also to give vital support. And it was on the back of this that I saw that TfL has visually mapped 18 of its busiest underground stations with the Google Street View, which is basically a backpack with a 360 camera on, and they wander around the tube stations and up and down the escalators, and it films and maps and stitching all this together. So the likes of underground stations such as Westminster, Embankment, Euston Square, as I said, 18 of their busiest ones. And it's to make the journey planning easier and safer for wheelchair users. And there are plans to map another 18 of them by the end of this year as well. And TfL have been working with the wheelchair charity Whizz-Kidz on this project. And the charity's boss, Sarah Pugh, said, this will support wheelchair users to travel through stations, planning routes, and travel with confidence and independence. She goes on to say that we continue to support new innovations from TfL and other partners to ensure access to public transport is equitable for all. So a great example of some fascinating technology being used to good purposes. So fantastic there for Whizz-Kidz and TfL.
Yeah, that is. I love the sound of that. That's amazing, and it is interesting, isn't it? Because you do hear these stories of people who are in the public eye who are wheelchair users who end up being the last people off a plane or miss their train stop because no one's there to let them out and to help them off the train or off the plane. And it's it's horrendous. I mean, they're doing a good job of highlighting that horrible reality for disabled people. But it's good to see that someone like TfL is working with a wheelchair charity, Whizz-Kidz, to actually see and do something about that. So hats off to them.
And it seems like the plans are going at pace, aren't they? They're going to have the whole tube sector mapped out at some point, and the technology is so readily available and easily available now. There's so many applications for so many other avenues.
Amazing. I remember a Michael McIntyre sketch when he was talking about Google Maps and how you can see the whole world. You can map the whole world, every street in the whole world. It's all there at a click of a mouse for you to look at. But what do every single person do? What does everyone do when they go to view it? The first thing they look at
house
is their own house. There is
their own house. If you see yourself in the garden or in the window or whatever.
Yeah, hilarious. Anyway, yeah, for me this week, it's two stories, both of which have really sparked some controversy and sort of been on the front pages of the news as well in recent weeks. And they've both kind of got links to charities that have sort of made me sort of think a little bit. The first one of these stories is the scandal around Greg Wallace, the MasterChef presenter. Now I don't want to go into the details of the scandal. I'm sure everyone's aware of what's happened, but he's been dropped as a charity ambassador as a result of that scandal. And I can't remember now for the life of me what the charity was. I think it was an autism charity that dropped him as an ambassador. And it just that sort of made me think a little bit about PR and celebrity management with charities. It's the risk factor for charities of getting into bed with, well, that's a terrible way of putting it, with celebrities, partnering with celebrities. And obviously you're doing it for the right reasons. You're doing it for the betterment of the charity, to increase awareness and all of that. But there is a risk factor there, isn't there? Everyone you end up partnering with or doing stuff with and becomes part of your promotion and your publicity, there's a risk there. What if suddenly those people are in the press for the wrong reason. What is the impact on the charity? How do charities mitigate against that risk? What happens in those instances? So I think that's a really interesting story, and I think it's one that I'm really keen that perhaps we get somebody in to talk about it. It's the whole question of ethics and due diligence around those partnerships as well. When you partner with an organization, you put a fair bit of work into the due diligence that goes into checking that organization and so on. And then whether or not aligns with you ethically as a charity as well. Do charities do that with celebrities? Does the same process happen with celebrities? I'm really keen to sort of find out a bit more about that, because it's not really something I do on a day-to-day basis. So I'm keen to find out more about that. So that was controversy number one. And then controversy number two was the whole thing around Band-Aid and the fact that Band-Aid has re-released a 40-year anniversary version of Do They Know It's Christmas, the song that we all are all very familiar with. And they featured a whole host of remixed vocals in there from famous artists over the years. And this all came to the fore recently when Ed Sheeran came out and said that he hadn't been consulted on the use of his vocals. And had he been, he would have said no. He wouldn't have allowed for his vocals to have been used on this remixed new version of Do They Know It's Christmas, because he stands with Fuse ODG, an artist who I must admit I'm not familiar with, but he's basically criticised Band-Aid, saying that 10 years ago he refused to participate in Band-Aid because he recognised the harm that initiatives like it inflict on Africa. He says that while they may generate sympathy and donations, they perpetuate damaging stereotypes that stifle Africa's economic growth, tourism and investment, ultimately costing the continent trillions and destroying its dignity, pride, and identity. And again, really got me thinking about that, and how campaigns can have a limited lifetime, and how circumstances and society changes can sort of mean that they don't have the same impact, or they have fundamentally shifted, and public opinion has fundamentally shifted. And so that just got me thinking from a marketing perspective. It opens up that whole conversation also around stereotyping, and how you've got to be very aware of what you're doing and how it may impact other people. So just a whole sort of interesting conversation, I think, off the back of that. Are you a Band-Aid Do They Know It's Christmas fan? Were you aware actually that there was a 40th anniversary remix? It didn't do very well in the charts, or it hasn't done.
No, but you've just given me the fright of my life, Tim, because I can remember Band-Aid when it first came out. So I'm just going to leave that hanging there in the air, which makes me feel very, very old. So enough said about that.
Yeah. There we go. Who sung the first line on the original Do You Know It's Christmas? That's a pub quiz question the other night I was in.
That's a good question, isn't it? I can see so many of the faces singing so many of the lines in that studio, which at the time was, an amazing single in terms of nothing else like it. I can't remember the name of the first. Do you?
I think it was Paul Young. I think I might be wrong.
Yeah.
So I can write in and tell us that. But anyway, it's obviously the world has changed an awful lot in 40 years, and Band-Aid and Africa, the two might not necessarily be as close as they once were. And I think that's just an interesting conversation and paints an interesting picture for how charities should be thinking about the longevity of campaigns going forward, and how society changes can impact their way of thinking as well. So yeah, interesting.
Earlier, Chris Sherwood, soon to be the new CEO of the NSPCC, told us about his background and the journey to becoming a chief executive. In the second part of our interview, we find out how he's going to be approaching his first few months at the children's charity, how he finds time to take on a number of voluntary roles on top of his day job, and crucially, why he likes a Friday night at the pub.
Chris, as you come to the end of your time at the RSPCA, let's just look back on your time there, last 6 years. How has the organisation changed under your leadership over that time?
I mean, it's changed an awful lot, and it's a great job, and I would encourage anyone in the sector to apply for this. It's a fantastic job. It has its moments, but my goodness, I've enjoyed every day for the past 6.5 years in this job. But I think, your question was what's changed. But I think we've gone from being on the naughty step of the sector. Lots of articles when I joined about challenges at the RSPCA, from finance to governance to whatever. And now it's actually, I think the fact that I'm being asked to appear on your podcast probably illustrates that, we're seen as an organization as one of the leading charities in the centre. And I can see that in, how we're really an attractive place for talent, for people to come and work, and people want to stay here. Our staff turnover rate is running at about 7%, which is incredible when you think, we're a large charity with a large workforce, so I think it's that, and that's been through the organization: financial sustainability, investing in our future, digital, culture, governance, leadership. The organization, I'm sat in our small London hub, no longer in our big 3-story, 2-winged corporate HQ with my own car parking space and flagpoles. So, even symbolically, there's been that kind of shift, really. So, yeah, that's given me quite a lot of sense of satisfaction to see that change and to pass the baton, from my chapter in the RSPCA's history to the next person. And we'll watch with interest from afar to see what they do with the organisation.
And is there anything in particular, or any event or anything that happened in particular over your time at the RSPCA that you're most proud of? What's the one thing that you're going to look back on? I think, yes, that was fantastic.
There's lots of things, but because you're the charity podcast and you're thinking about how charities work, the historic AGM we had in 2019 to change our governance. I mean, there's just been so much noise about our governance, and that was incredible. Where we took forward a change to move the board of trustees from being a council of 28 trustees to being a board of 12, and seeing that introduce term limits and really modernise our governance. And we hadn't done that since 1974. A report called the Sparrow Report, which was all in the press in the 70s. So we'd waited from 74 to 2019 to change our governance. And that was quite early in my tenure, but a really big focus for me. And for me, changing governance is not an outcome, it's an enabler of all the things we've done since: an ambitious strategy, a new brand, which I'm really proud of, really helping more animals through our rescue and care work than we have done for years before, really dialing up our prevention, our campaigning work. That all came from that governance change in Church House in Westminster on a Saturday afternoon. It was yeah, it feels like a long time ago now, but seeing the difference that's been made from that is incredible. So no, I'm quietly proud around that.
So that was 2019, just before the pandemic stress in. And to me, that's when we talk to a lot of people on the show and we ask them things that challenged them over recent years. The pandemic obviously is one that they reflect on particularly. What was it like for you leading the RSPCA through the COVID?
It was really tough. We'd had a really difficult. So I came into the organisation and governance was a big challenge, but we had a really big financial hole. And we were really draining our reserves, and it was quite worrying. Looking at some of the scenarios of where the organisation could go, we were really worrying about cash, if I'm honest with you, which should just never happen in an organisation like the RSPCA. So we did have to make some really difficult decisions, and we did reduce our headcount by 15.4%. And that was really sad. And, it was well documented that was very difficult in our relationship with Unite, the union. And we have a good constructive relationship with Unite now. We've worked with them to really build a great place to work, invest in our family-friendly policies and well-being and, flexible working. But at that time, we had to take cost out of the organisation because we were unsustainable. And that was really difficult. And personally, it was difficult for me because I actually had a health scare in the middle of COVID. I had suspected bowel cancer, and I was doing consultation meetings with people whilst also going through tests for bowel cancer. And I didn't have it, thank goodness. But I remember that being a really difficult time, and being really difficult because people were very upset with me for not coming out and doing face-to-face meetings, but I couldn't travel. And I didn't want to tell people the real reason why, because I didn't want the story to be about me, because it was about them. And so it was a bloody nightmare, but difficult, but the right decisions. Fundamentally, it's never easy to close down services or to help, make cuts to jobs. And that was really one of the most difficult times for me as a leader, and really awful for the people involved. But actually, it restored the RSPCA's finances and has enabled us to be able to invest in our future, as we are doing now through our transformation program, which is, that led to our rebrands and growing our income, which we're doing now, and most importantly, really being able to have a much more effective service operation that we have, because we're a big service provider for animals around the country.
Yeah, a huge operational shift that COVID and the pandemic did for all charities, really, Chris. We saw the same in our respective charities as well. Having taken the RSPCA through that period, why now is the time to move on for you?
It was a difficult choice.
Yeah.
I wrestled with it quite a bit. I love this organization, and it's been one of the greatest pleasures of my life to be chief executive. But NSPCC has a really special place in my heart as an organization, and child protection is a cause that's really important to me. I have lived experience of kind of the issues that NSPCC talks about, and it was one of the roles in the sector that I thought I'd love to be able to apply for that. And so actually, when I was contacted to be offered the role after going through a very, 7-stage intensive recruitment process, I think they knew me better than the end of it. It was actually a very easy decision to make. Yeah. NSPCC is just, I'm so excited to be joining the organization because it's such an important institution in our country, and the work that it's done over 140 years is so vital for protecting children and young people. So whilst I'm very sad to be moving on from the RSPCA, it's in a really good place, the RSPCA, with a fantastic chair in Claire Horton, a really strong board of trustees, good executive leadership team, good finances, investing in the future. It was time to move on, and the appeal of NSPCC was, and the important work there to build on Sir Peter Wanless's incredible legacy over 11 years. It was actually, in the end, a relatively easy decision to make.
Tell us a bit about how you're going to approach that role when you walk through the door for the first time. Do you have an idea of what you want to achieve in, say, your first 100 days? That sounds a bit like asking a prime minister what they're going to do in their first 100 days. There's a question they always get asked, but I'll ask it of you. Any thoughts on that front?
Well, for me, a previous chief executive of mine, she talked about 3 words when joining a job, was listen, learn, and then lead. And that's always stayed with me. And, what I certainly learn about is building that relationship with the board is going to be important, building that relationship with the executive team, and getting out and about. So I'm going to be traveling all over the country during my first 100 days. I'm not sure I'm a big fan of the 100 days. It's a bit too hard of a business review for my liking. But, and during those early months is really getting out and learning about the organization and hearing stories and, asking good questions. What do people like about the organization? What frustrates them? And what do we need to do differently? So there'll be a lot of listening and learning, really. And I think that's incredibly important in these roles, is to really understand why an organization is like it is. I've learned that from my time at Relay and RSPCA. NSPCC is similar. It's an old organization. It's got a proud history. And you have to understand that to understand about how you can work with the organization. And particularly because in the social sector, I don't know NSPCC's culture. I'm still going to be very new there. But certainly at Relay and RSPCA, people are very invested in the organization and coming in and saying, I've got the plan, I know the way, or coming in and, creating the burning platform, this is all terrible, doesn't tend to work so well. So for me, it's going to be about from good to great. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to getting out and about and traveling all over the country and to learn more about the organization and really build my understanding, and then look at where I think I can add value as a chief executive with my team, really. So that's how I'll approach. So a lot of the conversations, a lot of discussions. One of the great things about chief executive roles is that there's also quite a lot of tea and cake that's involved in that as well. Normally good biscuits. So I shall look forward to that as well.
That kind of answers the next question I was going to ask about how you're going to approach taking the team forward, because obviously change is scary for everyone concerned, Chris. So ensuring that new CEO comes in, everyone will be thinking, what does that mean for me? What does that mean for the organization? Will they understand what we are and what we do? So I think that's possibly in everyone else's mind in the charity. And I guess a huge part of your role, as you said, is to listen and learn and understand people's nerves and expectations.
Yeah, and there's that old adage that, as a chief executive, what you say gets amplified 100 times. And I've like that, in amusing ways. When you start hearing Chris Sherwood has said, it's almost like, come down from Mount Sinai and, I've got the 10 commandments and now shall go forward. And you do have to be aware of that, and also I can't not be myself, and so, it's that the organization getting used to the fact that I'm going to be different to Peter and I'm going to lead the organization in a different way. And, Peter's left an incredible legacy, but he's been the chief executive there for 11 years and I'm going to be new. And so it's that helping the organization to see, what might work in slightly different ways. And I'm a slightly different type of character. And, Peter was a big fan of football and I know absolutely nothing about football. When I was a youth worker years ago, I used to actually run a Saturday football club. And I remember this young boy came up to me and said, "Are we playing the offside rule today, Chris?" And I said, "Oh, of course. If the ball goes off the pitch, you throw it back in again." He wasn't particularly successful at the football club. So, but if people want to talk about musical theatre, then I'm your guy. So, so it's going to be that adjustment. But as I said, what I will be doing is really getting out and listening and learning and kind of holding it back a bit before you sort of run in with here's what I think. To take that time to understand, reflect, respect the organization, and then you add your bit to the conversation, really.
So I'll just say, Chris, apart from obviously the offside rule, are there any other sort of anecdotes or things that you think senior leaders or CEOs make when they first join an organization?
I remember once this woman who ran one of the related branches in the Southwest, and she said, "You aren't a seagull leader." And I said, "What do you mean by that?" Well, she said, "Seagull leaders, when they come to change, come in, steal your chips, and then shit on you." And I thought that was a really nice compliment. She said, "You're not a seagull leader."
So that's something you're definitely not going to do in your new role with the NSPCC. Everyone's chips, we can say this, are safe at the moment.
Yeah. Also really made me giggle, that one did, yeah. But no, look, you just, I know, I'm fascinated by people. I'm fascinated by, I'm that kind of person that has conversations with people on trains and buses. I'm the kind of person that talks to people in my local coffee shop, and Tom, who makes my coffee for me, is his birthday this weekend as well. He's on a 9-day shift. I'm just fascinated by people, and so I just love getting out and talking to people. I'm the kind of person that would really struggle to be in an office and not see people from day to day. I found COVID really hard being, at home, because I live on my own as well. That was really difficult. The cat got sick of me talking. So that social aspect is important for me because I'm just fascinated by what makes people tick and what they're interested in and where they come from, their life story. It's fascinating to me.
Again, looking through your LinkedIn, Chris, I was really taken by the number of voluntary roles that you also take on, and there are other organizations you're involved with on a voluntary basis. How do you balance the work and the commitment that comes with being a chief executive and to find time to do all those voluntary roles as well?
Yeah, I haven't really got a good answer for this one. I'm not very good at it, Tim. I know I'm supposed to give you that, I'm very good at my work-life balance. I'm really not. I'm really good at encouraging other people to do it. I'm not so good myself. And look, I love the sector. As I move on to NSPCC, I will really scale that back. Currently sit on the European trade body for animal protection, and I'm also chairing the global body. And there's a link to my RSPCA role, and we'll pass the baton on to other colleagues in the RSPCA. I'm really proud to be on the board of NCVO. I think we've got a fantastic chair in Piers and a fantastic chief executive in Sarah Elliott. So it's a real joy to be involved in that. And I love chairing the charity awards for civil society because you just get this incredible window into innovation and best practice in our sector. And that takes a couple of days, but I love it. I normally sort of lock myself away in my flat for a weekend and I have to read something like 200 applications and then just be really inspired by what they're doing, across the sector. So I really enjoy the opportunity. But look, I think it's important to give back, and that's my form of volunteering in the sector, to be able to hopefully deploy some of my experience in kind of boards, and I think it's an important part of being a leader, really. And I think it brings value back to the organization I work for because I bring that external perspective, and hopefully that insight as well. That's how I rationalize it. But yeah, am I good at the work-life balance? I try.
Chris, it has been a pleasure having you on the show today. Thank you so much for giving us so much of your time. My final question, bearing in mind all that you've said about all that comes with being a chief executive, plus your volunteer roles and everything that goes with it, what does Chris Sherwood do to relax? What do you do in the time when you have time off?
What do I do time? Well, you've heard traveling, and it's definitely a big part. And then I've got a nice break to go traveling between this job and the new job. Quite looking forward to that. So I'll be doing a bit of trekking through South America and doing some fun things there. And then secondly is friends, Friday night in my local pub with my best mate, chewing the fat, drinking a nice pint, catching up, and then exercise as well. I'm a keen cyclist. And so, if you see somebody zipping past, if you see middle-aged man in lycra zipping past you on a bike, it's probably in London, So it is that, yeah. And my partner keeps me very grounded as well. He's Italian, and so he likes to cook, which is why I cycle quite a lot to offset. Okay. So yeah, but it is people around me as well, and that's what keeps me grounded and fun.
In each episode of the Charity Show, we want to celebrate our sector superstars, those incredible people working, volunteering and fundraising across our sector. And you can nominate your deserving colleagues, volunteers or fundraisers too. Just email us at thecharityshowpod@gmail.com or get in touch through the links in the show notes. You can even send us a voice message that we'd be happy to play out in the next episode. So who's your superstar this week, Piers?
Oh, mine's over 3,000 superstars this week, Tim. I'm not sure what the collective name for it is, but it's that time of the year again, alongside office parties, Christmas jumper emails. It's the annual London Santa in the City run, which took place last week as this episode goes out. And there's another one planned for later on this week as well. And over 3,000 Santas, which is, a sight to behold. 3,000 Santas ran for over 50 different charities. And this year, the event was partnered with Sarcoma UK, which is a charity that tackles a group of rare cancers. So the run saw a wave of red-suited runners racing through London landmarks, St. Paul's Cathedral, River Thames, Millennium Bridge, Tower Bridge, a 2.8 mile, that's a 4.5 kilometre race through the city. So a sea of white beards and red-bellied people. And the event organizer, Rebecca Milburn, said, Santa in the City started 9 years ago with 450 Santas and has grown to become the incredible spectacle it is now. She says that this is more than just a run. It's a community coming together to make a difference. And if you've been lucky enough to be traveling through London when this takes place, it really is a sight to behold. Christmas has definitely arrived in the capital when there's 3,000 Santas bearing down on you along Oxford Street.
Excellent. I think there's lots of that goes on across the country. We have, as a charity, the firefighter charity, a fair few sort of Santa runs where fire services organise for us, and people don the costume and run for the charity. And also, amazingly, we have lots of fire services that put on, and individual fire stations that put on Santa sleighs. So they cover the fire engines in Santa stuff, drive around town raising money for us as well. So all hats off to the Santas. I've also just Googled what's the collective noun for a group of Santas. There isn't one, but there's some suggestions. A sack of Santas, a sleigh of Santas, or a jingle of Santas.
I like a jingle. Yeah. Jingle shall be ours known.
Jingle. Okay, my superstar of the week this week is a Somerset schoolboy, 10-year-old schoolboy, who's run the entire Cornish coastal path to raise money for charity. Freddie Story from Pitney near Somerton in Somerset completed the 300-mile challenge from Plymouth, South Devon to Bude in Cornwall, accompanied by his dad. And this is amazing because I'm walking very slowly the southwest coastal path with a friend of mine, and it's taken us years. We only get a couple of days a year to do it. It's taken us years to go not very far at all. So I know how much of a challenge this is. It's so up and down. It's not, we probably walk 12 to 15 miles a day and we're knackered by the end of it. By the time we get to the pub at night, we are knackered, absolutely done in. But he's doing this. He's averaging 18 miles a day. He did 18 miles a day, every day, to cover this 300-mile distance, which is incredible. And he says the hardest bit was going up and down on the blazing hot days. No surprise there. And when it's really wet and you're going downhill, then you're slipping, basically, he says. I feel very good about it and I'm very proud of myself. I'm also sad that it's over as well. And what a legend. His father, James Story, said Freddie regularly had to sleep in the back of the car to cover some of the longer days. On one occasion, they covered 33 miles over 2 consecutive days. So yeah, so hats off to Freddie and to his dad for what I know from my own experience is an incredibly hard challenge. So he's been raising money for Cornwall Wildlife Trust, and he's about halfway to his target of £5,000. So well done, Freddie. An amazing running feat there. So yeah, hats off to you.
That's amazing, that is. I mean, just the numbers. 482 kilometres, sometimes 30 kilometres a day.
Yeah.
10 years old. Yeah, what a staff. So that's a wrap for episode 15. Huge thanks to Chris for giving us an insight into life at the top of some of the UK's biggest charities. And we've got some other great guests coming up either side of Christmas too.
Yep, in a fortnight's time, we're going to be talking about major donors and philanthropy with Sally Williams. And then after a little bit of a break for Christmas, we'll be talking to a couple of inspirational young ambassadors to find out why they give up their time for charity.
Looking forward to it, Tim. And don't forget, you can be part of the show too. Just send us your voice messages or get in touch through any of the links in the show notes to share your stories and tell us what you'd like us to cover.
And of course, we also want to know who your superstar fundraisers, volunteers or colleagues are too. So head to the show notes and share their brilliance with the rest of us.
And in the meantime, please follow or subscribe to us on your usual podcast platform and leave us a review, both of which will help others to find the show.
So that's it for this episode. Thanks for listening. Take care. Good luck with your charity shop Christmas shopping, and we'll see you soon.